faculty members, and we are into this session 15th of day 6, and the session is headed by Dr. Anil Kumar S. Gandhi sir. Sir is a Director Center of Excellence of APAC in DFE Pharma, and sir is going to deliver a topic on application of computational tool of QBD and the design of experimentation in formulation development. Thank you, sir, for joining on this ESTTP platform organized by Seven Hills College of Pharmacy. And to do the honors, I request Mr. Pavan Kumar, sir, to give the honorary introduction about Dr. Anil Kumar, sir. Sir, can you please?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Good morning, sir. Good morning and hearty welcome to all the delegates for the second session of day 6 in AACT sponsored online short-term training program phase 2 organized by Sonils College of Pharmacy. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce the speaker of today's session, Dr. Anil Kumar Gandhi, sir. So Dr. Anil Kumar Gandhi, sir, is currently working as Director, Center of Excellence, APAC Region, DFE Pharma Private Limited. In his current role, he is responsible for providing technical solution to customers using DFE pharma excipients across 20 countries of APAC region. He is also involved in setting up a R&D center for the company and execution of formulation development projects. Dr. Gandhi sir has more than 20 years of industry experience working with companies such as Rubicon Research Private Limited, Lotus Pharmaceuticals, and Lyras Life Sciences. His work experience includes the development of NDDS and generic formulations, analytical development, technology transfer, and intellectual property management. He has exclusively worked in the area of solubilization of actives, gastroretentive delivery systems, liquid sustained release technology, modified release systems, etc. Dr. Gandhi has 30 granted patents and more than 70 patent applications covering various aspects of novel drug delivery system. Sir has 5 international publications, 18 presentations, and 1 book chapter to his credit, apart from several review articles. He is also a renowned speaker and also spoken on many forums, including Colorcon's Innovation Forum, BASF Exact Event, Select Bio Seminar on Novel Formulation Strategies, and Apps Discussion Forum, and so on. Today, Sir joined for the session for delivering an expert talk on application of computational tools of QBD and design of experiments in formulation development. Welcome you, sir, for the session. And it's the time to hand over to you, sir. Sucharita ma'am, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful and nice introduction. Thank you so much. And on this note, I request Dr. Anil Kumar Gandhi, sir, to take over the session for an expert talk.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pavan Kumar sir and Dr. Sucharita for kind words and the welcome, and the entire Seven Hills Institute for organizing such a nice, wonderful training course, almost a week-long training course. And it's my real pleasure to be part of this session. So thanks once again in inviting me. Yeah. Can you see my screen? Hello, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir, I can able to see you.
Okay. Okay. So I've made little change in the topic. Considering that what I thought was that it's all focused on the research and the activities in the area of neuroscience. And so what I thought was, let me share with you all my experience in using QBD, which is a part of the topic anyway, and how we can use these concepts of QBD, which is a concept used by most of the pharmaceutical industry in product development, how we can use this concept in actual development, product development, even in the research institute or academic institute. And this will really make our research work very focused. The objective that I had in mind with this presentation, and as usual, this is a disclaimer that we have to present that these are purely my views, and it's intended for education purpose only. So that's the disclaimer part. And this is what we're going to cover today. So we'll start with the background, and then we'll go on to the QBD elements like quality target, product profile, critical quality attributes, risk assessment, formulation optimization. We'll also have a case study, and this case study will elaborate how we can use these concepts. and then we have a discussion regarding to how to use QBD in academic setup, and then finally question answers. So I think you all are aware about the question answer part. I think you can post them in the chat box, or you can ask them as per the standard norms that we have in this session. So with this much background, I think let me get started. So I think this is probably known to everyone and maybe discussed, but I thought it makes a good beginning for my presentation that it's really a very, very big market, neurological drug market, which was in 2018 around 70 billion US dollars, and it's likely to grow at 5% to around 120 billion US market, US dollars, which means it's a tremendous opportunity for growth. And this comes not just because of that there is so much value in it, but there is this comes because there is so much yet to be done on this. We know that there are many medicines for epilepsy, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, cerebrovascular disease, which constitute the neurological disorder. However, we still know that we are working towards making the drugs reach to the brain through blood-brain barrier. There are so many approaches that has been worked on, which means that research in this is going to be even more at a higher level, advanced level, and which means that there's a possibility that newer molecules, newer delivery systems, which keeps coming on this, people are working on this, and that really determines the market value. Typically, people see the market value in terms of population or how many patients are likely to get affected by neurological disease, and therefore, what is the market? I see it little differently. I see it as an opportunity that there are so many things that we all can do, either in terms of determining newer targets, determining ways of crossing the blood-brain barrier, how to make our medicines more effective. And that's the opportunity, and that's the reason for the growth across this market. And if we see typically, there are many drug delivery systems that have been tried, and these are some of the systems, not an exhaustive list, but of course, nanoparticles has been very, very actively considered, actively worked upon. Then there are viral vectors, there are exosomes, intranasal delivery systems, and so on. So the intention is not to really discuss upon the delivery system, but intention is just, bring the concepts of delivery systems into this disease condition, and then get into how we can optimize this delivery system. So the presentation will be applicable to any of these delivery systems that you might use in your research project to target a brain. So that's how the focus of the presentation today that I've planned. And as you can see here, the objective is to highlight the best practices of pharmaceutical product development using concepts of QBD, with a special emphasis on research in academia and research institutes. So you will see here that in around 2011-12, the concept of QBD was introduced by US FDA, and most of the pharmaceutical companies in India have adopted this. Most of the development in India happens through this concept of QBD, and the intention of this discussion or this talk is how we can use these concepts into our research areas in the institutes or in the academia, and certainly take advantage of the systematic way of doing it. Again, I want to emphasize that it doesn't mean that currently we are not doing it systematically. The reason of this activity is that whatever we're doing, we can actually document and probably have a somewhat unified mechanism or system of development. So that's the objective, and that's the reason I want to kind of explain on some of these concepts. all my presentation is based on ICH guidelines of Q8, Q9, Q10, and also very important, there are two examples. These are like 100+ pages documents on quality by design for ANDA for immediate release dosage form, and quality by design for ANDAs with a modified release dosage form. So which means that the USFDA has actually very clearly outlined how we can apply this concept. So please have a look at these documents if you are interested in this concept. Okay, with that, let's deep dive into quality by design. So when we talk of QBD, what does this mean? Basically, QBD is a systematic approach to the development that begins with predefined objectives. And this predefined objective is very, very important. Many times when we're doing research, we are not clear at times about what is going to be our end target. What happens is what we desire is the way research will, we whatever research we do, whatever results we do, derive or we get, based on that we will modify the eventual project with a broader goal in our mind. So the idea here is that what is that broader goal? That must be defined. We may change some of the directions because research is really unpredictable. We can't predict what's going to happen. So it's not, we're not talking that we should get biased or we should predict the outcome. This is only the way you reach to the outcome. So the process is what is defined by QBD. So we must have a predefined objective. It could be just that I want 25% of the drug to reach XYZ areas in brain. That could be my target that I want to begin with. Or I want to target my molecule to a particular region inside the brain. So that these kind of objectives must be very well defined, and then how we are going to achieve also must be defined. Now that's the first part. Next is that emphasizes on product and process understanding and process control. What we mean here is that we must understand what is the product, in the sense what are we developing. Say we are developing nanoparticles or solid lipid nanoparticles, then what all components are important, what are its characteristics and other things, and the process of manufacturing. What happens if certain elements in the process are changed, and how does it impact the overall product? So we must know that, and eventually it has to be based on sound science and quality risk management. So we'll look at the concept of risk management. Now it's also important to know that what is not QBD. And as I've been mentioning, that it's not something new. We all have been doing and practicing the very high level of scientific development. So it's not new. It's not just design of experiments. So a lot of people think that quality by design, which means that essentially what you develop has a built-in quality. It's just the design of experiment done through any of the software. Or it's not a theoretical concept that we're talking of. This is the concept that we must put to practice. So this is what QBD is not. And when we go to the next slide, I think quality by design, what I feel personally, for any researcher, be it in industry, be it in academia, QBD should be the way of life. And again, you will see that most of the examples in this presentation are pertaining to the formulation or the dosage forms, because that's my specialization. But there's no reason why these concepts cannot be applied to a project which is done on NCEs, to a project which is done in a clinical setup, or to a project which is done in herbal setup. Any of these areas, we can still apply the concepts of QBD as long as we understand what is meant by QBD. So that's the whole motto of the presentation that I have today, to make you aware of what is QBD concept and how we can use it. There are different steps of QBD. That's first step is QTPP, which is quality target product profile, then critical quality attributes, risk assessment, product optimization, and risk assessment again, which is updated based on knowledge. So we will look at all these parameters or all these concepts one by one. I'm not going to get into detail because these concepts by itself can be one topic of one session. So I'm not going to go into that detail, but my objective or idea is to make you all aware of these concepts and how best you can start using them in your areas if you are already not using. Again, I believe that most of us are already doing that. So let's get into quality target product profile, or what is known as QTPP. So if you want to understand this concept really well, what we need to do is just dissect this word quality target product profile. What does it mean? So when we talk of quality, it means that it determines the safety and efficacy of the product. So most of the cases in our research field, we're targeting a lot on the efficacy part, because that's what we want to achieve. Either we achieve targeting, we achieve bioavailability increase, or we look at the kind of clinical endpoint. So that's what we do, is mainly the efficacy of the development. But when the product goes into the market, you will have to consider the safety and efficacy both together. We might use very high-end kind of lipids or excipient in our formulation. But if these excipients have not been used so far, or they have some toxicity associated with them, then it may be a very efficacious product, but safety could be question mark, and we might not be able to get through in terms of the making this product available to the patients because of the safety concerns. So safety is actually the number one aspect on the development side, and efficacy, of course. These two parameters will determine the success of our product. So when we talk of quality, this is what is in terms of quality. What do you mean by target? Target is obviously what you want to achieve. When you say the product has to have a safety and efficacy, what are the targets of achieving this safety and efficacy? And then product profile means it's talk of the product under development or the research project. In next slide, I'll give you an example also of how does this QTPP look like. And very important statement you can see down is that we have to begin with the end in mind. As I was saying, it's not just good enough to say that I want to develop a drug delivery system for brain, because this is such a broad area, broad topic. What we need to identify and determine is go into further detail. When you say you want to deliver for brain, what exactly you want? How much you want the drug to get there? Or what is our target? So those things have to be defined. Or in other way also, we can say that if I want my product to be efficacious, what is my target in terms of making it efficacious? And we'll see it little more detail. So when we talk of QTPP, we have to set the elements that define drug product. Target or goal is always set in advance, and this in turn becomes guide to drug for product development. As I was saying, that if you are targeting brain, then obviously your first goal could be passing the blood-brain barrier, and then you already also define how much it is. If currently a particular drug which is in the market, it reaches to brain tissues, let's say with a 5% of the dose going there, something of that sort. Okay, take just as a arbitrary case example, or then my target could be that even if I achieve it 25%, then I have achieved five times the current what is there in the market. So which means I have increased the target concentration of the drug molecule 5 times. Now this is what is my target. Now is this realistic target? Now this I know from my literature search, from my research understanding. As a faculty, I know because few students have worked on the similar projects, so I know what it is. Now you can question me, challenge me if it is why 25, why not 15, or why not 45? And that's exactly what I mean by saying that, set the goal in advance. And this is what we should be doing, which is, optimistic, realistic, and we work towards it. So that's where I'm talking about setting the goal in advance. What forms the basis for this QTPP? Again, as I was saying, research publication, any project which is already developed, published, or in the lab already you have worked. Typically in pharma industry, the QTPP is derived by the reference product, and this is where I'm talking about the generic industry. When we talk of NCE, it is also governed by the understanding of the area. So again, if I develop a drug for Alzheimer's, what is there in the market? How much of that reaches in brain? Do we have information? What is its bioavailability? Are the bioavailability and concentration in brain correlated? All these questions, we will know answers because we know what is there in market. And that is what forms the basis for the QTPP, which should be set up in the beginning. And obviously, when to define QTPP, as I've been saying all this while, it must be defined in the beginning. It can be revised based on knowledge gain. So typically in the pharmaceutical field, we don't modify the QTPP. It is defined at the initial stage, and that becomes target, because at that time we know what is the reference product that we want to match. However, in the field of research, in basic research, many times things change, and that's where we can revise based on whatever knowledge we have gained. So if your research shows that you are able to achieve a 25% bioavailability with initial trials itself, or 25% of the drug reaching there, you may change this to 30% or 35% as your target, because you feel that there is still improvement possible. But we have to be very careful that we don't change it dramatically. Again, that I'll explain towards end. Now, very important to understand what impacts safety and efficacy. Again, I've given an example of a tablet, but you can surely visualize what is meant by quality. You will see two colors. The ones which are in the red are not QTPP. So color of a tablet, whether a color of tablet is blue, red, white, or anything, it has no concern with safety or efficacy. It may have concern on safety unless you are using the standard dyes and standard coating system. So that's different. Assuming that's there, then color of tablet is not a QTPP element. Route of administration, yes. If you deliver a molecule through oral route versus injectable route, obviously what you achieve in the blood or in plasma will be very different, and therefore route of administration is certainly a impact safety and efficacy, and therefore QTPP element. Flavor of a syrup, again, flavor has no impact. It is more to improve patient compliance or palatability. So it's not an element which is required from the safety and efficacy point of view. Dissolution, again, you will agree that it's a QTPP element. Shape of tablet, round, oblong, or any other shape really doesn't matter. And tablet assay does matter. If you have lower assay, it can impact efficacy. Higher assay means higher content in the formulation can impact the safety. And similarly, pharmacokinetics. So this is how you differentiate between a parameter which is a parameter which impacts safety and efficacy. If it does not impact safety and efficacy, then it's not a QTPP or a quality profile. Let's take one example. So this is how your table of QTPP should look like. You must have a QTPP element, you must have a target, and you must also have justification. Now, it's very important to have justification because it shows our thought process around the target that we are selecting. It makes us think why we are selecting a particular target. So let's take example, dosage form. It's a solid oral dosage form, tablet or capsule. Now the reason could be as simple as that, this is what I think is the most convenient dosage form for patients, or I may select a parenteral dosage form because I think that's the most efficacious dosage form. So it's perfectly fine, but you must define what is the target and justify it. Dosage form design, whether it's an immediate release or it's a modified release. Route of administration, that's IV or oral, buccal, topical, any of those things. Now dosage strength. Now this is very important, okay? Because many times, like if you are working on herbal-based products or nanoparticles, then we really don't know what is the bioavailability or what is the active component. So this becomes a challenge. However, we do make a start somewhere, right? So that starting point or that target point must be included. That I want to use, a herbal, let's say, seed powder of a particular herb at a concentration of 250 milligram in a tablet. That kind of information should be there. Now, if your target is clinical and you are doing multiple dose or dose escalation studies, then you can mention all three. But at least you know that you are targeting to study efficacy of 250, 300, and 350 milligram per tablet. So you can mention all that, but important thing is you must write down what are we targeting. Pharmacokinetics, as I was giving you example, are we looking at 25% of the drug reaching into brain? Are we looking at any other parameters with pharmacokinetics, like how quickly it reaches to brain? That's in case of Tmax. All that targets. Also, whatever is known. Sometimes these things are not known, but whatever maximum information we put here, it's going to help our project to a very large extent because it gives a lot of clarity. Stability, what is the stability expected? Then what are the drug product quality attributes? So we're going to discuss the quality attributes subsequently, and container closure. Now this is another very important aspect that I have seen in many projects, that we kind of miss on the container closure. We can't visualize what's going to be our final end product packed into. So this is something that having an idea is very important, that we should know what is the tentative pack. If it's a topical formulation, gel or cream, then what kind of tubes you are going to use. Again, it can be based on literature, it can be based on the projects carried out in the same lab, but that's what should be documented. So this is what, this QTPP element must be there, and you should make an effort to put all these things together. How does it help? Obviously, it focuses the team to brainstorm at the beginning of the project itself. It provides clarity to the students, and finally, it can be also amended if based on progress. So this is possible. So I was a research advisor at some institute, and then I started implementing this concept, and I realized that there were so many rounds of discussion required initially to bring this QTPP table, but once it was there, it gives a lot of clarity, particularly to the students, because many of the things are very clear to the research supervisor because of pure experience or past student who has worked on it, but the student who is going to work on that project doesn't get that clarity unless there is a brainstorming discussion around it. So it really helps. Though I mentioned that we can change it, amend it, but I would strongly recommend that there should not be any dramatic changes to QTPP, as it makes all the earlier efforts futile. If we just simply say that, I can't get a tablet, and therefore let me try injection. These are two very broad kind of set of things. To develop an injection, you require a different excipients, you define different process. To develop a tablet, you require different things. So you can change from tablet to capsule because you are not able to tablet it, or you have some other issues. So that is okay. But you really can't change from a tablet to parenteral. It will mean that you're almost scrapping off earlier development. So please avoid such kind of changes. With this, we go on to the next element, which is critical quality attribute. And like we did with QTPP, let's look at this critical quality attribute by breaking the terms. What we mean by critical? Critical is any attribute that can impact safety or efficacy of the product and is considered as critical attribute. So now we talked of dosage form, we talked of route of administration. Now within a particular dosage form, that means let's say I have decided a tablet. What is the attribute of tablet that will impact the quality? So I give you an example of SA. Now SA high or low can have safety and efficacy challenges. So what is that high and what is that low? Now this is what you're going to define in critical quality attribute. So the SA is a very important attribute. So any attribute that can impact safety and efficacy is considered as a CQA or critical quality attribute. The definition of the other two things remain same. So what helps or what do we get with CQA? So it's a property or characteristic that when controlled within a defined limit or range ensures desired product quality. So this goes little or a much more beyond QTPP. QTPP is a very broad term. Now we're going into specifics. To give you example again of SA. Now I know that many pharmacopoeias give range of 90 to 110% in the SA of a tablet. Some pharmacopoeias, some talks of or regulatory authorities even talk of 95 to 105. Why? Because below 90 you can have you're likely to have efficacy issue, and above 110 you're likely to have issues on the safety. So that's the control limit. So what you're doing is you've identified a critical attribute, that's SA, and you're defining a range. So whenever my value of SA is going to be between 90 to 110, my product is of the quality as defined by my QTPP, or my product's safety and efficacy can be guaranteed. So this is the crux of critical quality attribute. Now let's look at a topical formulation of solid lipid nanoparticle, and we will look at the QTPP and the CQA. Now when we talk of topical formulation of solid lipid nanoparticle, actually we are doing formulation in two stages. First stage is the development of solid lipid nanoparticle, and second stage is the incorporation into gel formulation. So we may actually have two CQAs, we may actually have two QTPPs. What I'm giving you here is an example of stage 2 or final QTPP and CQA. So going back to again the same QTPP table, dosage form is the gel formulation, which is the overall I'm sorry. What we've done is we've defined these QTPPs into two parts. Overall QTPP, which is stage 2, and the stage 1. So dosage form is the gel formulation, which is the target dosage form. But my stage 1 dosage form is lipid nanoparticles, solid lipid particles suspended in liquid. Okay. So actually here also there is a typo error. It's a stage 1 QTPP. Route of administration in both the case is topical. Dosage strength, I may have a different dosage strength when I talk of gel formulation, and a different dosage strength when I talk of topical, SLN, because when I say strength is how much of API is present in SLN and how much of API is present in the final gel formulation. So I may have a different spec, but eventually what is important is what I have as the final formulation. And then you can see other parameters. And let's look at what are the CQAs. So if you look at the CQAs, Appearance for gel will be semi-solid viscous gel, whereas a liquid with suspended particles is on the SLN part. There is a viscosity of the final gel that we want to keep it as a very viscous, so it can be up to 500,000 or 50,000 CPS. Particle size, I may not have that specification in the gel, but I will have certainly at a SLN stage. Polydispersivity index, again, it will be there for SLN. Beta potential for SLN, assay, and the diffusion study spreadability, I'll define all for the topical product. So you have to be creative, you have to understand your project, and you have to understand your product well and define these elements. So what we've defined here is the CQA, as you are seeing in terms of either assay or in terms of even if you see entrapment efficiency. Now, there are some products where you may have entrapment efficiency of just 25 to 50%, and it could be good for that molecule. We may accept it, but I know that this is what is my target and this is what I'm going to accept, and that's where the definition of CQA will help. And as I was mentioning, it is certainly possible to arrive at QTPP element or CQA for any chemistry or herbal project. If you are talking of a chemistry project and you're talking of a particular synthetic reaction, you're talking of developing a molecule, and let's say very simplicity, let's take an example of paracetamol, then what is my target profile when I want to achieve a paracetamol? What is going to be my impurity level? What is going to be my content or assay of paracetamol in the API that I make? Like typically it's 99.5 to 100 or 101, 99 to 101 is the range given. So these kind of elements can be given. What kind of solvents that I am likely to have, so that that can also be included in my CQA. Those kind of solvents. I don't need any solvents like benzene in my final product. So yeah, I may define it that way. So this is how I can define a QTPP and CQA for any project. Now coming to very important part after we talk of QTPP and CQA is drug substance. And why I'm specifically taking this drug substance is because it's obviously the most important component of your drug product. And I always insist that it must be studied very thoroughly, whether it's an industrial project, whether it's a research project. Typically in industry, there are systems in place, there are ways to do this, and therefore we don't have a major challenge. But in research area, in academics, we tend to have some challenges, and I'll get on to those challenges in the subsequent slides. Now, what all things we should be looking at when we talk of drug substance? So, physical properties, obviously this is something which we get from the literature, most of it. Then we want specifications, results from 3 batches, particle size distribution, very important, solubility profile, polymorphism. Again, I can give you example of solid lipid nanoparticle or even nanoparticle. If you are dissolving drug into some medium, what is the solubility of your drug into that solvent or mixture of solvent is important. Is it critical? Now, what typically we do is we choose the combination of solvents in which the drug is soluble. Now, let's assume that your molecule has a polymorphic property, different crystalline structures, and you received a particular crystalline form, let's say form A, at the beginning of the study, and you received form B as a second lot. Now, the solubility of form A and form B in a particular solvent is different. So what happens is when you receive the second lot of sample of your API, you will see that you are not able to dissolve it, or your nanoparticles are not forming as expected. And you will wonder why this is happening. And the key thing is the change in polymorphism, but it's very difficult to derive or understand that parameter at that point in time, because in development phases, we are actually changing a lot of variables. So to pinpoint at that point in time, polymorphism becomes very difficult. So Therefore, the characterization of a drug substance at the beginning is very, very important from the any research project perspective. Then we want to know chemical properties. As I was saying that you are preparing again nanoparticles or any other delivery system. Let's say we require heat in the process, and if you require heat and the product that you and your API is not stable, which means that either you are selecting the wrong process because API is not stable, or wrong composition because you have not stabilized the API. And eventually what you will get is you might get nanoparticles, but because of the temperature sensitivity, your assay could be low or your impurity is going to be certainly high. So these kind of properties, chemical properties, the oxidative degradation, many APIs undergo oxidative degradation, and therefore understanding of this is very important. Sometimes you do get this information from the vendor or the supplier who has given you API, but most of the times you can get also this information in literature. So I would really encourage everyone to have these kind of studies done. Then we go to biological properties. This is the crux of your development effort because you want to achieve a particular target either in terms of bioavailability, pharmacokinetics, or efficacy. So you must know these parameters. BCS classification is a very, very important tool. So we must have it under our knowledge. So how do we see this as a problem in institute? So typically what happens in institute is that APIs may be received as a gift sample. And when we receive as a gift sample, obviously we don't ask, or we hesitate to ask a lot of information. And many times companies also don't provide a lot of information. So that becomes a real challenge. We receive it in small quantities. And sometimes also happens that once the vendor stops giving you the sample, what you will do now, go to another vendor without realizing that other vendor is giving you a totally different profile in terms of API properties. So these are real challenges that we may face in institute. The remedy obviously is that we understand the drug properties thoroughly, key properties, and thoroughly when I say is through literature. Obviously literature is the primary source, and second is obviously you ask the vendor about properties like particle size distribution, crystalline form, etc. Always insist on certificate of analysis and additional data as required. This is something very important. If you get a certificate of analysis, you'll get a lot of information about the molecule. The next component of your drug product is the excipient. So obviously, we might have a prior experience based on the prior development experience of a similar drug or dosage form. We may actually select an excipient, and as I'm saying, this could be even with respect to lab work that is done previously. So you want to select it, that kind of excipient with that understanding. Reference product or marketed product. So you want to see this market product in the product in the market, and then you want to use this as your excipient. Compatibility. So you want to also ensure that you understand the chemistry very well. Now, to give you an example, that if you know that your drug has a primary amine structure, then you don't want you don't want to use lactose in your formulation, or you don't want to use conditions in which you may have some kind of interaction. So these kind of things, if you have your drug which is kind of oxidative degradation potential, then you may not use some of the components which are known to degrade your excipients, like PVP, which has the peroxide contents in the formulation. And then you want to know what is your function in the excipient. You want to know what is the function in the as a special function like solubilizer, or you don't want to use any kind of additional components, or whatever you use, you must have an understanding of that component. So this is what constitute the drug product. So what we have seen up till now, we've seen a quality target product profile, we have seen the critical quality attributes, then we have seen the drug substance, we have seen the excipient. Now let's get into the risk assessment. Risk assessment basically is a structured way of determining impact of a material attribute or process parameter on the critical quality attribute. Now, I just now mentioned to you about the impact of polymorphism on your process. This is a very important aspect to know. So what we do in a structured way, we determine what is the risk of a property, and this is nothing but risk assessment. Now, if my drug does not exhibit polymorphism, which means it's unlikely to behave different, with the different vendors, then my risk associated with solubility and polymorphism, it becomes negligible. Then what I'll say is the risk of this parameter is low. And that's exactly what we need to understand when we talk of risk assessment. Now, from definition point of view, what is it? It's a structured way, which means that we document it with proper justification. By what we do here, we determine the impact, which means that what is an impact? Does the polymorphism have a significant impact or non-significant impact? So that's what we talk about, determining the impact. And impact on what? Now, impact on the critical quality attribute. Now, critical quality attribute could be simple as dissolution, but my process determines that. So if my any element that impacts process will impact my dissolution, and therefore it will have an impact. Now, typically when we talk of the risk, we talk of three risks, that's low, medium, and high. And low means it's an acceptable risk. Medium means a risk which is acceptable, but we need to acknowledge and understand. And high risk means we need to we need to work on it. Now, when I say work on it, means what? That suppose I tell that my my API has the polymorphic issues or different polymorphic forms, then it is very important that we put we identify that as high risk. So it is very important that we say that I always want a polymorphic form A for this API. So that's how I control it. So first is to understand that polymorphic form has an impact. Next is how am I going to control it. So that's how we do the risk assessment. I'll give you an example, and this is the particle size effect. If you see that we have a drug substance which is to be formulated as tablet, BCS class 2, and then dose is high and process is wet granulation. Now, very important, if I give you this information, you can derive something out of this straight away. When we say BCS class 2, means that it's a low solubility and high bioavailability or high permeability drug. Now, when I say low solubility, it means that the drug solubility will be determined by particle size. Okay, this is what I can determine. Okay, now if the solubility is determined by particle size, what quality attribute it will impact? It will impact dissolution. Now, how it will impact? If we have a higher particle size, let's say a D90 value of 150 micron, then dissolution can get retarded. I can get slower rate of dissolution, or I can get incomplete dissolution. And if I have lower particle size, so instead of 150 micron D90, if I have D90 of 15 microns, which is 10 times lower, maybe I will pass the dissolution, right? That's the impact. So what we call risk assessment, CSD has a high impact on dissolution, and therefore risk of failure to comply with PSD criteria is high, and what we need to do is set up a specific limit for this. this is how we do a risk assessment. I want you all to have a look at it. Okay, in this table, you look at the left-hand side is the critical quality attribute, which is nothing but the CQA as identified in the process. And on the second row, you see the drug substance attribute. So we put everything together. So at the beginning itself, we put all this together. I know whether it's going to impact dissolution. I know what are my critical attributes, which are listed here. Then I'll see whether solid form of my drug will impact any of these things. Solid form as in the polymorphic form. So if polymorphic form is different, then obviously dissolution will get impacted. So I put there high. Then accordingly, I categorize the risk across all the properties of the drug substance. And this is what I do. Then what I do in the next step is wherever there is high, that means a polymorphic form has a high impact on dissolution. Because I know that drug exhibits polymorphism, so I will try to put a limit there. So this is how we control or we ensure that we get the consistent quality drug substance. Now, if going into example, in academia, basically, drug substance risk assessment, we must do it. That will allow us to understand quality attributes of the APIs. Excipient risk assessment, which means we know that which excipient is extremely important for our formulation, and process risk assessment. So we know that which process is important, critical with respect to my product. So this is how we must do this, and I believe or I expect or I want you all to do some of this theoretical risk assessment at the beginning so that you don't have to repeat some of the trials which will arise because of failure in identifying the risk. So that's something very, very important that we all must follow. Now let's get on to the optimization part, and then we'll go on to a case study, which will be the last part of my presentation. So optimization. So when we talk of conventional approach, again, this could be a research project or this could be an industrial project, but conventional approaches, I select the excipient for my formulation. We will optimize the concentration of key excipients. Then I'll also look at process, but typically I've not seen many people also optimizing process, and maybe we do it at one factor at a time. Okay. Now, if I look at QBD approach, I will do excipient selection, but I will do a thorough risk assessment on drug substances and will do a thorough risk assessment on the excipient and also on the process. And then I will optimize the concentration of key excipients through design of experiments or one factor at a time. It's very important for you to understand that I'm putting here DOE or one factor at a time, which means that it's perfectly fine if you don't have the DOE software, you don't use it. I mean, it helps, it has a lot of advantages, I don't say no, but it's not a mandatory thing. What we're talking about is systematic way of thinking or doing a research project. And for that, you don't have to spend extra money. It's only that we need to have a disciplined way of doing work. So it's not about DOE, but risk assessment through CQA, QTPP that separates the conventional and QBD approach. And this is very important because this is the mindset that many people will have that, you know, I can't follow a systematic way because I don't have software or I don't have XYZ. But that's not necessarily required. What we require is just a systematic thought process. We require brainstorming session, which you know we can put all students together, ask them for this, that what we think that we're going to achieve for this product, what we're going to do in terms of development, what's going to be our target, and that's what is very important. I think we've looked at the different steps, so I'm going to quickly go to the next slide. Okay. So now we're going on to the case study. For simplicity, I've taken the tablet example, and this is the example taken from QBD IR example of US FDA, as I mentioned earlier. So this is the QTPP. I've not included the justification here, just not to crowd the slide, but I think we did discuss about the QTPP. Then we go on to the CQA. So the one which are highlighted or which is in yellow, yellow shaded reasons are the ones which are critical. So identification is important but not critical. Essay, as we are saying, 100% of the label claims. That's some, we may give that kind of target as that we want 100%, but there is a range which is say 90 to 110. Content uniformity, dissolution, degradation products, residual solvents, microbial limits. So this is how we will define our CQS or critical quality attributes. We must know what are our excipients and what is their role in the formulation. And there is something called as a critical material attribute. I've not dealt with that in this purely because of the time limitation, but we must know if we are going to use lactose monohydrate, then which type of lactose we are using. In terms of lactose monohydrate is available in different grades. So are we using lactose monohydrate, milled and sieved kind of lactose? Are we using a spray-dried form of lactose? Are we using agglomerated type of lactose? Or, I mean, I'm already saying here lactose monohydrate, but if it was only lactose, I would have put that criteria that is it lactose monohydrate or it is lactose anhydrate. Microcrystalline cellulose, maybe I want to know density. So I need to know what are the important properties also of excipients that impacts my formulation. Like I have done drug substance risk assessment where I know polymorphism is important, solubility is important, particle size may be important. So like that, I should know what are the important properties also of my excipient. This is the risk assessment. Now we are going little bit into deeper. Now, if you see drug substance, we have not listed all because when we did the first risk assessment, we identified that only particle size is important, and therefore I'll consider only particle size here as a formulation variable, and then I put all other components. And we have taken example of a tablet just for simplicity. So if you see here like magnesium stearate level, then you know that if you have a high magnesium stearate level concentration or you mix it with magnesium stearate for longer periods, it will impact dissolution because it impacts disintegration. So we have put this as high. Then what we do the optimization, and suppose we are doing with DOE. So these are the three levels we have identified for magnesium stearate and also talc together. We can, in design of experiment, we can take 2 factors at a time. In one OFAC studies, you will do 1 factor at a time. So this is how you will do this, and then you can identify what is your target. So this is the optimization study. Next is the updated risk assessment. So if you see the earlier slide, wherever in this slide you see the things were high, let's say an example of magnesium stearate level which is high, you will see here magnesium stearate has been made as low because we have done trials or we have done optimization studies where we are saying that if we use magnesium stearate at the level in the formulation, say up to 0.5 to 1%, it does not impact dissolution. And I'm never going to use more than 1%. So this is how I control, I reduce the risk, and wherever I cannot reduce the risk, for example, drug substance particle size, then what I will say is I will control it by putting a specification. So this is how we use case studies and or this is how we use rather risk assessment in our development. With this, I come to the last slide of my presentation. How can we use all this information in academia or in research projects? Because the focus of this, training program is the faculties of various research institutes. And therefore, I feel that, this aspect of how we can use it in academic environment is important. So I'm translating some of these things now into the academic setup. So first, always define QTPP, which means that we must define project objective. Whatever small may be or whatever stage it may be, but I would recommend everyone to have a QTPP table available when we give or when we assign a project to any student. Let's have the QTPP table. We may ask the student to do the literature himself, so he becomes part of the process. But before he or she starts the lab work, there should be a QTPP available. And similar way, we must also have a CQS, which means that when we are doing our development, how are we going to target, or what is going to be our target, what methods we will use when we talk of dissolution. Are we, do we know what media we are going to use? If we say that dissolution should be, giving example, that if current data shows that, for a product to reach in brain, we need, dissolution, very high dissolution. Okay, just giving a hypothetical case study. You know that the marketed or current formulation achieves a dissolution of 30% or 40% in 6.8, okay, over 45 minutes. Now this is what is known. So what I will put as my target, okay, I know that 30 or 40% is not enough. Let's put a target of 75% in 45 minutes. So it's very clear that I'm going to, whatever development efforts I do, whatever solubilization, suppose I'm just giving example of solubilization. So I use different surfactants. My target is dissolution in 6.8, 45 minutes, it should be 75 plus or 80. So this is very clear, becomes very good target, and it also talks of method. So it really helps in a focused way of approaching to the project. When we are developing formulation, carry out the risk assessment. I've shown you how we can do the risk assessment. Then get onto the process. Don't just restrict yourself to formulation. Process is also very important. Any modification or changes in the process parameters can lead to changes in the outcome or in the results or in the CQA or QTPP, and therefore process is very important. Carry out the optimization study using DOE or one factor at a time studies, which is very standard way of doing optimization. When we look at process, also consider critical attributes and critical process parameters. Now, I didn't touch upon critical process parameters. Briefly, I talked about, suppose your process is involving a heating step, and you know that heating at 60 degrees is very critical. If you heat at 40 degrees or if you carry out that process at room temperature, you don't get the product. Okay? Or if you do the process at 100 degrees, you will have higher impurities. So this temperature becomes very important process parameter. So I should also know what are my critical process parameters. Finally, like all projects, we must do proof of concept studies in vitro, in vivo, as we have defined. And based on the results, what we have observed, you can actually go back, right, to further advance the technology with this next project. So this is a continuous cycle. We have taken one approach. Let's say you have a student who is doing just a master's, which means about 8 to 10 months of research where he cannot do overall research. We give them a one particular aspect. Let's say he only does the temperature optimization. Everything else is constant. And then we do some studies in vitro and identify that, oh, that temperature setup with these excipients and with this all other parameters is not working. I thought that 60 was optimum, but it's not working. Then you go back and then try to do the revision in either process or in composition and have the cycle repeated. Does not mean that we need to change QTPP, because if you are only changing the process, then you are still targeting the same QTPP. However, if you see that there is a dramatic impact on the in vivo efficacy or safety, which demands alteration of QTPP, that's where we should go to QTPP. But again, my advice is that for one particular research project, let's not change it. It could be a part of next project also. So this is how I feel, I see how a research project can be handled using this concepts of quality by design and systematic way of working in the research lab. So that's the concluding slide that I have. Thank you so much for your patience listening. Thank you so much for time. Thank you so much for the Seven Hills College of Pharmacy for giving me this opportunity. And if there are any questions, I can take them. Thank you so much once again.
So nice to hear you, sir, actually. So wonderful presentation. As usual, you nailed it, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And participants are requested to unmute your mic and get the clarifications from sir if you have any queries. Or you can post your questions in the chat box so that we can able to access it and get the clarifications.
I hope the session was clear or it was well delivered. Otherwise, I don't see any questions. So I hope it was well understood by participants.
No, sir. I think you have an access to check the chat box. So Dr.
I am
was
checking.
telling it's a nice session. Truly, it was a wonderful session. So you are the person for QPD, and the same thing you did it now, actually, in this session.
I hope it was not too much away from the basic theme also of the training.
No, sir, definitely no. Because in the drug development, actually, we are into the field of QBD, and we must learn. And not only the drug development, it is a tool where we must habitate to use in various areas. What, as you said, in pharmacognosy or in analysis or in any other kind of research during this process of drug discovery, you can use it anywhere. That is the only thing.
That's what I also emphasize. And it's only structured way of doing research so that it's helpful for everyone. It's these concepts are it takes a lot of time for understanding, but once we implement, it's easier. I think, as I told you, there are detailed sessions I have on YouTube also. If participants want, they can go and listen to those presentations as well on YouTube. So they'll get little more in depth. I mean, this session was kind of divided into 3 sessions of 1 hour each when I have given it earlier. So yeah, that's also you can, if anyone wants, we can share the link.
Yes, sir. That is the session actually where I was so much impressed and made you to bring out into this platform on this College of Pharmacy actually. You can access a lot of messages here. So just faculties are responding like very informative, thank you, and you can see a lot of applause from the faculty members.
But I want to really understand from them that do they see any challenge in using this concept? And that's why actually I want to understand from them. And probably if they see any challenge and they can ask me questions on how to resolve that challenge, maybe I can help them. But the whole idea is that we should implement this.
Yeah, probably most to me personally, sir. Actually, when we were attempting with QBD, The first challenge we face is maybe the model is not significant. That's the first challenge where we put out all the levels, and when we run the model, finally we'll get that model is not significant, stating like our p-values will be are not fitting into the range of significance, and lack of fit will be not significant. That is the one challenge we'll be mostly facing. And the second challenge is to get out the perfect desirable, that is called design space, what we call, to get out a perfect design space uh, for a critical material and formulation attributes, actually process and material attributes, to get an optimum CQV, that is quality attributes.
Sure.
That
Uh,
is big challenge.
yeah, what you're actually talking about is the design of experiments, really, right? And I really didn't touch upon the design of experiments today. But having said that, it's very important that how we select the labels, particularly in our study. So that's one very important aspect. Second aspect is, are we selecting also the right target? Okay, that if we select the dissolution as the target, or we select hardness as the target, or it could be anything like lipid nanoparticles, if you select percent entrapment efficiency as your target. So are these targets selected which are relevant? For second thing is, the labels are relevant. Like I'm just giving you again for example is, let's say we do magnesium stearate study as I showed here. And then if I select magnesium ranges, magnesium stearate ranges, which are let's say 0.1 to 10%. I'm giving a little dramatic example. But if I use these kind of range, then I'm not going to get a good fit, because it's not going to behave linear in this entire range. At the same time, I shouldn't be using like 0.5, 0.6 and 0.7 because I know it is going to pass. So when I select the three ranges or two ranges in my factorial study or any other design that I use for this study, those ranges have to be very appropriately with lot of thought we have to use. Okay. Having said that, and believing that you've already done, and there is a lack of fit, then we have to do what are the next steps. One of the ways of doing that is to transform the data. There are different transformations available, and simple could be again log transformation. When you log transform the data, maybe your model will show a good fit. And third and last thing is that we might have to change the design in order to get the right fit also. So there are a lot of elements in design of experiments that we must consider to get a right fit into our model. And then you also talked of design space. Design space is also a very complex kind of concept. But what I want to know is really, do we use in our academic field the design space and other other concepts really, and from what aspects do we use this?
Yes, sir, we are using in project purpose, actually academic projects.
Okay, maybe you are trying to optimize the composition. So, in fact, I had one slide on design space, but then I removed it later on because thinking that it requires more time, more explanation. But yes, design space could become challenge. Again, it depends on what are the factors we have selected, what are the labels at which we are selecting, and what tool we are using for the design space. So it is a little advanced kind of statistical tool if we are talking of design space, but it will depend on what all things we have done before reaching to the design space.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, do you use these QTPP or CQA concepts in your development?
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay.
Personally, I have. And it's DY is a part of QBD, and the second important part actually is RA, that is risk assessment, sir. So can you throw some light on RA tools, what we are using, and very compatible to all the delegates?
Exactly. So the risk assessment, there are many tools available. People use simple tools like what I showed today, low, medium, high risk. There is something called as the risk priority number tool, RPN number tool, wherein you give, instead of low, medium, high, you give numbers which are ranging from 1 to 10. And then, you also use these terms with respect to what is the severity of the impact. Means if you fail into that particular process parameter, or in composition, if you end up changing the composition, what is the impact? So what is the severity? Is the impact going to be dramatic, or is the impact going to be less severe, or not so much impact? Then you also have the detectability part coming into it, which means that are you able to detect the impact of this change? That is also important. So based on the concept of severity, detectability, and what is the likelihood of this change to occur, based on this you give a risk number, and this number is then used to determine whether the risk is, overall risk is high or low. However, it becomes too much of involving exercise, and even if we do the exercise with without assigning numbers the way I showed you, by putting just low, high, or medium risk, based on our knowledge, that is also still good enough. What I showed you was composition risk. Actually, you have to do the risk assessment like this for the process also. Each and every step of your process must undergo this exercise of risk assessment. It's again same thing. On the left hand side, you will put the critical attributes, and on the top row, you will put what are your process steps. Could be blending, compression, coating, all those things. And then you see which element has an impact on which critical quality attribute. So that process impact also must be determined, and then you have a control over entire development effort.
Yes, sir. Very rightly said. Yeah, because when we are publishing, another last query from my side, sir. Actually, I have too many queries in QPD.
No, please go ahead. I'm actually wondering that, and I'm feeling little nervous that it's not coming from participants. So I'm feeling little nervous about it. More questions always. I like it.
Yeah, so when we are going for writing a papers to a few of the journals, like when we have equal or more number of critical quality attributes where we need to be focused, like some of the formulations where we have a 4 or 5 critical quality attributes which are having an equal impact on the quality of a product. But when you go with the model, as minimal is the best to design the model and to get a best fit of the model, right? So we'll be selecting a 2 or 3 critical quality attributes finally, and we are making a formulation and we are communicating. But finally, at the end, the reviewer will post us to us like, why can't you select the 4th and 5th critical quality attribute as your parameter in designing this model? So in that case, how can we select?
No, so see, the criticality of your attribute has to be established first, right? And now, if you have with justification, you have given that 4th or 5th attribute is not critical with justification, then that should be good enough. Because if you are going to model it with too many attributes, then model becomes very complex, because there become so many aspects. So many Y's, if you may see that in that equation, that it makes it very difficult. In fact, you will then generate one equation for each of the attributes, and which makes the entire thing very complicated. So there are different ways. One way is obviously to theoretically prove or justify that it's not a critical attribute. Second way could be that you can do some trials, not necessarily DOE, you can do OPAC trials and prove that it is not a critical attribute. Okay. that also can be done. So you are, through data, you are proving that it's not an attribute, critical attribute. If after doing this, also the reviewer insists, then obviously you might have to, include it and then show that there is no impact. But I would really avoid that, because the whole process of CQA is to identify what is critical. We may have 10 parameters, but not all of 10 are going to be critical. So it's always that we identify 4 or 5 and then study the impact with respect to each individual parameter. As I was showing you that when we talk of magnesium stearate, it does not impact assay, it does not impact, it is going to impact only dissolution. Then when I'm doing optimization with magnesium stearate, I will only study dissolution. I will not study any other parameter. Now, reviewer may say that, oh, magnesium stearate also impacts hardness. Okay, but is hardness my attribute? I'm not identifying hardness as my attribute, because if hardness, there is a failure in hardness, first of all, if there is a low hardness, I don't have a product. So there's no question of testing it. If hardness is going to increase, eventually that increase in hardness is going to impact dissolution, which I am studying, right? So this is how we have to justify on the attribute.
Very nicely explained, sir. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. And you can have an access to chat box, sir.
Yeah, somebody asked me
see.
about the email ID, so I've just given my email ID as well.
Okay, sir. And you can see a lot of positive messages here.
Yeah, but I still don't agree. I mean, I want more questions. Yeah.
Any faculties, do you have any queries? Please unmute. And,
I'm seeing one Dr. Kumuda saying definitely we will need your help. So I want to know which way I can help you.
Madam, Kumuda, madam.
Yes, madam. So whenever we are going for this QBD workshop, sir will help us to give like these seminars like that. So we will discuss with our management to call upon us, sir, once again to give like this a wonderful seminar. For that only I given the message like that.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your wonderful session.
Yeah, I hope it was useful. I mean, that's the only thing that I feel you should. I feel that it is. You must understand the concept and through whatever delivery mechanisms that I had. So I hope it was clear.
Yeah, definitely, sir. Definitely, sir. We will come back to you, sir.
Oh yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem. And anytime. I mean, for any of the participants, don't hesitate to reach out. If possible for me, I'll surely reply to you. If there is a need for any discussion, also I'm open for any such thing. So it's perfectly fine, right? So don't hesitate. I think I always feel that when I was doing my studies or my research, I was helped by so many people, so many senior people. So it's now my time to give it back to the community. So I'm always open. Don't hesitate. Thank you.
I hope there is no more questions, sir.
Yeah, there's no question. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll proceed further with the moment of appreciation.
Sure.
So I take this opportunity to present a certificate of appreciation to you, sir. So from the management and the principal side, I'm just presenting it to you. Kindly accept it virtually, and I'll just post it within a couple of weeks. Probably by June mid or June end, I'll post it once this.
No problem. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Thank you so much for joining, sir. I know you are very busy and you have a lot of assignments, but still you accepted and you done the best.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
Privileged to have you, sir, really.
Yeah, no, anytime. Thank you so much. I think this also builds a relations with your institute and so many participants who participated. So some relations is built. Yeah, I'm very happy about it actually.
Yes, I
And
hope so. In future, we'll have a good connect with St. Joseph's College of Pharmacy in different aspects.
yes. Anytime I'm there as a research advisor for few institutes, as I've told you. And again, I'm saying any of the institutes you feel that I can be within whatever available time I have, I'll surely like to support those activities.
Definitely, sir.
Okay.
So we will grab that. Definitely.
And thank you so much personally to you, Dr. Sucharita, because you initiated this discussion and gave me this opportunity to talk to all the wonderful participants and connect with your institute as well. So I'm really thankful to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Namaste, sir.
Okay.
Stay safe and please take care of you.
Yes, thank you once again.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Can I leave now?
Yes, sir. We can leave, sir.
Okay, thank you.
See
Bye.
you, sir. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Participants are requested to join for the last session of the CSTTP at 2 p.m. and receiving many messages regarding overall feedback and also the end test exam, that is end exam of the CSTTP. So don't worry about the exam, and we are just sorting out the eligible participants, and those who have attended 80% of sessions, we are just sorting out all the participants list now, and to only the eligible participants we'll be sending you the end test examination link by mail. So by tomorrow morning 10 a.m. you can receive the end exam test link, and you'll be having a 2 to 3 hours of a time, and you can submit the end test exam before 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. The time also will be mentioned specifically in the mail. So today there is no end test examination. Tomorrow we'll send the link to your mails and you can attempt it. And by Monday or Tuesday we'll be getting you certificates too. So overall feedback as usual by evening I'll be posting in the WhatsApp group. You can respond to that. And by 3:30 we have an valedictory. So the details are also posted in the WhatsApp group. Without any delay, just join together with us by 2 p.m. Thank you so much.